Hello friends, this is Christian Wiese. Today I wanted to talk to you about the 5 stages of divinity. Stage 1 is the one that I cannot talk about, the absolute, the infinite, outside of my experience. Stage 2 is the level that some of us reach in deep meditation, awareness outside of body, mind and world. Stage 3 is, and that will be the focus of today's presentation, awareness embedded in body, mind and world. And the last 2 stages are the more human stages. Stage 4 is if the decision maker feels she has a decision to make and is quite self-aware of all the drives, aspiration and aversions. And Stage 5 is the unconscious state when consciousness drives everything, divine consciousness that is, and the decision maker thinks he is in charge, yet is completely driven by forces outside of his conscious understanding. All right, to perhaps sum up what follows in the next 8 minutes, the conclusion is you are more enlightened than you think you are. I say that often we toggle between these states and often have very ripe spiritual moments. It is just our drive to be always connected that often is in the way. But in any case, let's go back to the 5 stages, or rather the 4 stages. I leave the absolute to itself. Stage 2 is something that I have experienced, still an idiosyncratic element in it, and I'm sure you also had a taste. I once had a vision that was very interesting. I wanted to know something, and suddenly I was catapulted to a river. So I was sitting there next to the river, and I knew that the river held all the answers I wanted, but I was just too comfortable to go there. I was just sitting there next to the river of knowledge and was just enjoying myself. It was serene, there were no thoughts. Typically people call it bliss, but I felt it more as pleasurable. It was beautiful to be there, but then when I left that state, what felt like hours later, I also was happy. It was not an addictive desire to get back to that state. It was beautiful, but in a sense it was not so relevant because it was outside of body, mind, world. For me, spiritual living is kind of dealing with life and being connected to the higher state of energies, and that is then level 3, where awareness, the divine awareness exists, yet so does body, mind and world. It's a very confusing state. One of my friends had the following experience, which reminds of the near-death experience. You know, in the near-death experience where entities float to the ceiling, you can see the body that supposedly is you, but you are separated from it. That is kind of awareness looking down on body, mind and world. So my friend had the following experience. He went to a gathering and came back and knew he still had to do some groceries. So he was in the grocery store, and suddenly he experienced an entity outside of his body. He saw that body going through the list, purchasing groceries, making decisions. Actually, the body forgot a few items on the grocery list, so there was a little bit of a confusion, but mostly that body did just fine doing whatever it had to do, checked out stuff. And then somewhere on the parking lot, the 2 entities met again, and he never again had that spiritual experience. And I think this kind of started his quest and has been going on for decades in the meantime. So that is a state that we can have, and I would actually say it happens quite often, even though it's not as extreme as the one that happened to my friend. Yeah, and then the next two stages, perhaps stage 4 is modern man. You are self-aware. You know that you have certain drives, certain aversions, but you meet life and you have decisions to make. Maybe for somebody who is not spiritual, it's more called ethical. So let's say I'm a goal-getter, but do I really want to undermine a colleague in order to get what I want? I know that I love sex, but I also realize that there's a other person involved, and I also know that I crave camaraderie, having just a beautiful connection with the other being, and one just feels one has choices to make when one dates or when one's in a relationship. Yeah, and the fifth dimension is a very weird one, the unconscious dimension. And I have a strange example in that direction. It's actually a true story. A somewhat middle-aged man, quite successful, still good looking, marries for the third time, is very excited about it and tells his friends, this time I learned from my mistakes, this time the marriage will last. And a friend pulls him aside and says, look, I want to show you something. And puts up the first wedding photo, puts up the second wedding photo, and then puts up a photo of the bride-to-be. And says, why don't you look at those photos and tell me what you see? And the man looks at it and says, wait, they all look the same. So for some reason, he had not noticed that he always fell in love with exactly the same type. Now, I don't know how the story ended. Maybe he still got married, and maybe he still tried his best this time to make it work. But to him, there was a level change where he kind of understood beauty triggers him, or whatever it was about that particular type that attracted him. He was literally unconscious that that life's illusion played that trick on him. But otherwise, he was as sane as you and I. So those aha moments, they also happen to us when awakening happens, but not that often. Mostly we understand what our drives are about, what our aversions are about. So mostly in a spiritual quest, it's about level 4 getting to level 3. We feel there's a decision to make, but we have to awake to the fact that there is no decision, there is no decision maker. There's actually an entity standing next to energy recycling itself. And once we reach that level where we just, actually to quote Ram Dass, our journey is about being more deeply involved in life and yet less attached to it. That's really it. Getting the self out of the way without being desensitized, without being less empathetic for what is actually happening in front of us. In a sense, we get pulled more into life, but more as a novelist, as a storyteller, not a storyteller of us, but rather a storyteller of, wow, look at those energies floating in the space. They have absolutely nothing to do with me. Once again, another quote from Osho this time. Creativity is when you are not, because creativity is the fragrance of the Creator. We essentially get ourselves out of the way. That is spiritual living to me. And there are many paths that lead to that. Each of us has a favorite one, but in essence, all we really have to do is just step aside and let the energies, the pregnant moment, deliver the baby, and we are just there helping the delivery, but otherwise it's not about us at all. I claim we are, once awakening happens, we are more enlightened than we think we are. Those pregnant moments often happen, and often we actually do what the moment wants us to do. And for me, that is all that really matters. Those metaphysical experiences of floating in the air and so forth, and experiencing infinity, they're all very nice, but they don't help us really when we are dealing with the decision at hand. And for me, spiritual living is the understanding there is no decision to make. There is no decision maker. The moment takes care of itself. We are loving, concerned, empathetic onlookers. That's all it takes. That's spiritual living to me. All right. Thank you very much for listening in. Until next time. Bye.